My name is Susan Miller. I'm 35 years old, a freelance graphic designer who's been scraping by with small gigs for years. Born and raised in a working-class family in Tampa, Florida, where my dad was a mechanic and my mom a part-time bookkeeper. I always knew my family thought I was the disappointment, the one who never quite measured up, but I never expected my own mother, Jessica, to call me worthless right to my face at our annual Thanksgiving dinner in front of everyone, just moments before a lawyer walked in and announced I'd inherited $65 million from my late grandmother. Life has a way of flipping everything you thought you knew upside down, and that night in Miami changed everything for me. Before I dive deeper, let me know where you're tuning in from. Drop it in the comments. Hit that like button. And subscribe because I've got more to this story coming your way tomorrow. Growing up, I was the kid who didn't shine like my younger sister, Linda, who's 31 now and a hotshot real estate agent closing million-dollar deals left and right. My parents, Isaac and Jessica, never let me forget it. Linda was their pride, the one who made it, while I was the one who wasted my potential on art school and a career that barely paid the bills. For years, I tried to win their approval, taking on extra freelance work to prove I wasn't a failure, even helping with Linda's open houses when she needed a hand. But nothing was ever enough. They're not rich, but they live well in a nice Miami suburb, and they always acted like my choices dragged the family name down. Susan, why can't you be more like Linda? My mom would say at every holiday, her voice sharp enough to cut. My dad wasn't much better. He'd just nod and say, "You gotta step up, kid." Like I was still a teenager flunking math. Linda, she'd smirk and toss out, "Maybe try selling houses instead of doodling." Sis, that Thanksgiving, I walked into their house expecting the usual jabs, but I didn't see the gut punch coming. I'd been grieving my grandmother, Mary, who passed 3 months ago at 90. My one true supporter, the woman who told me my art mattered, who lived simply in a little Key West cottage and never judged me. I figured the lawyer's call about her estate was about her house, maybe some small savings. But that night, as my mom's words hit me like a slap and the lawyer revealed the truth about Mary's past, I learned family isn't always what it seems, and sometimes the people who call you worthless are the ones who don't see the real you. For years, I'd been trying to prove I wasn't the failure my family painted me to be. But no matter how many late nights I spent on freelance designs, or how many times I showed up to their events with a smile, it was never enough for my parents or Linda. They had this image of me as the screw-up, the one who picked a useless career while Linda was out there building her empire, selling beachfront condos to millionaires. My dad, Isaac, would sit at the head of the table every holiday, bragging about Linda's latest deal, her shiny new car, her perfect life, while my mom, Jessica, would chime in with, "If only you'd applied yourself. Susan, you could have had that too." It wasn't just words, it was the way they looked at me, their eyes full of pity mixed with judgment, that made me feel smaller every time I walked into their house. Linda was worse, always tossing out little digs, like, "Still chasing those art dreams. Huh? Maybe one day you'll make something of it." Idbite me tonga. Nod. And keep going. Because that's what I'd learned to do, swallow the hurt and keep trying to belong. But deep down, I knew their respect was a finish line I'd never cross. Over the last 5 years, things got harder, not easier. My dad's health started failing after a heart scare, and he leaned on Linda to take care of things, like she was the only one he trusted. My mom, always critical, got sharper, her comments cutting deeper at every family gathering. "You're 35. Susan, should say, when are you going to grow up and get a real job?" I'd lost my biggest supporter when my grandmother, Mary, passed away 3 months ago. She was the one person who never made me feel like I had to prove anything. Her little cottage in Key West, filled with old books and her quirky paintings, was my safe haven. We'd talk for hours on the phone about life, about how she believed in me when no one else did. When she died, it felt like the last piece of my foundation crumbled. My parents barely showed up for her funeral. They sent flowers and a card, said they had commitments. But I knew they just didn't care enough. Linda didn't even bother with an excuse. She just didn't come. I was left alone to sort through Mary's things. Her handwritten notes, her faded photos, trying to hold onto her memory, while my family acted like she was just some eccentric old lady who didn't matter. The weeks after her death were a blur. I was so caught up in grief, in trying to keep my freelance work afloat, that I barely noticed the voicemails from Mary's lawyer, Thomas Reed. He kept calling about settling the estate, and I figured it was about her cottage. Maybe a small savings account she'd tucked away. I told him I'd deal with it after the holidays, thinking it was just paperwork, nothing urgent. I had no idea it would lead to the moment that flipped my entire world upside down. That Thanksgiving in Miami was supposed to be just another tense family dinner. I'd survive by keeping my head down and getting through it. I drove to my parents' house, a nice, modern place in a gated community, all glass and palm trees. The kind of place Linda helped them buy with her big commissions. I walked in, carrying a homemade pumpkin pie I'd spent hours on, hoping maybe this time they'd see I was trying. But from the moment I stepped through the door, I could feel the air heavy with their usual disappointment. My mom was setting the table. Her lips pursed as she glanced at my pie. Store-bought would have been fine. "Susan," she said, not even looking at me, "you didn't have to go through the trouble." My dad was in his recliner, scrolling through his phone, probably checking Linda's latest Instagram post about some luxury listing. Linda was already there, dressed in a sleek blazer, sipping wine and talking about her newest client, some tech mogul buying a penthouse. "Hey, sis," she said with a smirk, "still doing those little logos for startups?" I forced a smile, set the pie on the counter, and told myself to just make it through the night. Dinner started the way it always did, with my parents fawning over Linda. My dad carved the turkey, going on about how proud he was of her closing a deal worth $3 million last week. My mom nodded along, adding, "She's really carrying the family name, isn't she?" I sat there, picking at my food, feeling like an outsider in my own family. I kept thinking about Mary, how she'd always tell me to hold my head high, to not let their words define me. But it was hard when every conversation seemed designed to remind me I didn't measure up. Then it happened. Halfway through the meal, as the mashed potatoes were being passed around, my mom turned to me, her voice sharp and deliberate. "Susan, honestly, when are you going to stop wasting everyone's time with your little drawings? You're not getting any younger. And it's embarrassing to have a daughter who's basically worthless compared to what Linda's done." The words hit me hard. Worse than any jab I'd heard before. Linda laughed, not even trying to hide it. "Yeah, Susan, maybe it's time to give up the hobby and get a real job," she said, leaning back in her chair. My dad didn't say anything, just kept eating. But his silence was agreement enough. I opened my mouth to respond, to defend myself, but the hurt was too raw, and I didn't trust my voice to stay steady. I'd spent years taking their criticism, trying to prove I was worth something, and now my own mother had laid it bare, in front of everyone, my aunts, uncles, cousins, all watching, some looking away awkwardly, others nodding like they'd been thinking it too. I was still reeling when the doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected. My dad frowned, setting down his fork. "Who's that? We're not expecting anyone," he said, his tone annoyed. My mom waved it off. "Probably a delivery." "Susan, go check." Since you're closest to the door, it was another dig. Another way to push me to the edges of the family. But I got up, glad for an excuse to step away. When I opened the door, there was Thomas Reed, Mary Slavier, standing there in a rumpled suit, holding a leather folder. "I'm sorry to interrupt your holiday," he said, his voice calm but urgent. But this can't wait. I need to speak with you and your family about Mary's estate. I stared at him, confused. Now? On Thanksgiving? I asked. He nodded. It's time. Sensitive. Susan, trust me. You'll want to hear this. I led him inside, my stomach twisting with a mix of curiosity and dread. My family wasn't going to like this interruption. But something in Reed's expression told me this wasn't just about a cottage or a few $1,000s. As we walked back to the dining room, I could hear Linda's voice, still gloating about her latest sale, and I braced myself for whatever was coming next, knowing it would change everything. As I led Thomas Reed back to the dining room, the weight of my mom's words still burned in my chest. Her accusation of me being worthless, echoing louder than the clatter of dishes or Linda's smug laughter. My family was in full swing. The table a showcase of their usual performance, my dad boasting about Linda's latest real estate triumph, my mom nodding along like it was the only thing that mattered, my aunts and uncles chiming in with their own stories of success, all of them acting like I wasn't even there. I could feel the familiar sting of being invisible in my own family. But Reed's presence behind me, his leather folder tucked under his arm, gave me a strange sense that something bigger was about to unfold. I didn't know what yet, but his urgency, showing up unannounced on Thanksgiving, told me this wasn't just about settling my grandmother's modest estate. I braced myself as we stepped into the room, the smell of roasted turkey and sweet potatoes filling the air, the table packed with relatives who barely glanced my way, unless it was to toss out a pitying comment about my struggling career. My mom looked up first, her eyes narrowing at the sight of Reed. "Who's this?" "Susan, we're in the middle of dinner," she said, her tone sharp, like I'd brought a stranger to ruin her perfect holiday. My dad set down his glass, his face creasing with irritation. "This better be important," he muttered. I took a deep breath and said, "This is Thomas Reed, Grandma Mary's lavier. He needs to talk to us about her estate." Linda snorted, leaning back in her chair. "What? Did she leave you her old paintbrushes? That's about all she had, right?" A few cousins chuckled, and I felt my face flush. But he didn't respond. Reed stepped forward, unfazed by the hostility. "I apologize for interrupting your Thanksgiving," he said, his voice steady and professional. "But this matter is time, sensitive, and requires your attention. It concerns Mary Miller's estate and its distribution." My mom rolled her eyes. "Can't this wait until tomorrow? We're trying to have a family moment here." Reed didn't flinch. "I'm afraid it can't. The terms of the estate are specific, and I'm required to make this announcement at a family gathering. Like this one." Cloak. That got everyone's attention. My dad leaned forward, his businessman instincts kicking in. "What kind of estate are we talking about?" he asked, his voice skeptical. Linda crossed her arms, smirking. "Yeah. What's the big deal? Grandma lived in that tiny shack in Key West? What's there to announce? A couple $1,000? I wanted to snap back, to defend Mary's memory, but I held my tongue, sensing Reed was about to drop something none of us expected. He opened his folder, pulling out a stack of documents, and looked directly at me. "Before I proceed, I need to confirm that Susan, as Mary's direct descendant, is present, along with her immediate family Isaac, Jessica, and Linda." My mom's face tightened. "What's this about? Susan? Did you know about this?" she demanded, her voice accusing, as if I'd been hiding something. "I had no idea," I said, my voice firm despite the knot in my stomach. "I thought this was about her cottage. Maybe some savings. I didn't ask for this." Reed nodded, acknowledging my honesty, then addressed the table. "Mary Miller, known to most of you as a simple woman who lived modestly in Key West, was not who you assumed she was. She was born Mary Caldwell, the only daughter of the Caldwell family of Palm Beach, one of Florida's wealthiest dynasties in the mid-20th century, with holdings in real estate and shipping. Quite. A murmur rippled through the table. My dad's eyebrows shot up, and Linda's smirk vanished. Caldwell? As in Caldwell Enterprises? My dad asked. His voice tinged with disbelief. He'd spent his life in business, fixing cars for rich clients. And even he knew the name. Reed nodded. The same. Mary was their sole heir until she chose to walk away from that life. She fell in love with a man. Her family didn't approve of your grandfather, Susan, and when they threatened to cut her off, she chose love over money. She moved to Key West, raised her family, and lived simply. Never speaking of her past, I stared at him, struggling to process this. My grandmother, the woman who taught me to mix paints and find joy in small things, was secretly a heiress? It didn't make sense. Linda broke the tension with a laugh, sharp and mocking. So what? You're saying Grandma was sitting on a fortune and chose to live like a hippie? That's ridiculous. Reed didn't react to her tone. It's true. Mary rejected the Caldwell wealth, but her parents never removed her from their will. When they died, their estate went into a trust, sealed until her death. That trust, valued today at $65 million, passes to her direct descendants Susan and her mother, Jessica, with provisions for Isaac and Linda. Quote. The table went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air before a storm. My mom's face froze, her usual sharpness replaced by shock. My dad's mouth opened, then closed, like he couldn't find words. Linda leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. 65 million? And Susan gets a cut of that? You've got to be kidding me. Reed looked at me, his expression kind but firm. Susan's portion, after allocations for her mother's care and other distributions, comes to approximately $40 million. I felt the ground shift beneath me. $40 million. It was a number so far beyond my reality that it didn't feel real. Like something you'd hear in a movie. Not your own life. My aunts and uncles exchanged glances. Some whispering. Others staring at me like I was a stranger. My mom recovered first, her voice cutting through the stunned atmosphere. This is absurd. Susan, you didn't know about this? You expect us to believe you weren't scheming behind our backs? Her words stung, twisting the knife she'd already plunged earlier. I swear. Mom, I had no clue, I said, my voice shaking with frustration. Grandma never said a word about any of this. Linda laughed again, but it was brittle. Forced. Convenient. Isn't it? You play the struggling artist, and now you're suddenly loaded? What a coincidence. Quote, my dad, usually quiet when my mom and Linda went after me, finally spoke up. Hold on. Jessica, if this is true, we need to know the details. What's the catch? He asked Reed, his tone all business, like he was negotiating a car repair. Reed adjusted his glasses, pulling out another document. There's no catch, but the trust has specific conditions. It requires a public announcement to all family members at a gathering like this. To ensure transparency, that's why I'm here tonight. My mom's face darkened. Transparency? You barge into our dinner uninvited, and you call that transparency? This is a private family matter, she snapped. Reed remained calm. I understand your frustration, Mrs. Miller, but Mary's instructions were clear. The Caldwell family believed wealth should be acknowledged openly to avoid manipulation or secrets. Linda rolled her eyes. So we're supposed to just accept that Susan, of all people, gets $40 million? She's never done anything to deserve it. Her words hit me hard, echoing what my mom had said earlier. But I didn't have time to respond before Reed spoke again. Mary's decision was deliberate. She wanted Susan to have the freedom to live on her own terms, something she valued above all else. I sat there, trying to wrap my head around it all. My grandmother, who'd lived in a tiny cottage with peeling paint and a garden full of wildflowers, had been hiding this massive secret. I thought of the times we'd sat together, her telling me to keep creating, to not let anyone make me feel small. Had she known this day would come? My mom wasn't done. She leaned across the table, her eyes locked on me. You've always been a disappointment, Susan. No ambition, not drive. Just wasting your life on those silly drawings. And now you're telling me you're inheriting millions? It's a slap in the face to Linda, who's worked so hard for everything she has. Linda nodded, her face smug. Exactly. I've been killing myself closing deals, building a name, while you've been doodling in your little apartment, and now you get a free pass? That's not fair. I wanted to scream, to tell them they didn't know me, that I'd been grinding just as hard in my own way. But the words stuck in my throat. My aunts and uncles were whispering now, some looking at me with envy, others with skepticism, like I'd pulled off some kind of con. Just as the tension was about to boil over, the doorbell rang again. My dad groaned. What now? Another lawyer? He said, half joking, but his face was tight with annoyance. My mom waved at me. Go answer it. Susan, you're good at handling interruptions. I got up, Milex heavy, and opened the door to find my Aunt Margaret, someone I hadn't seen in years, standing there with a man in a sharp suit. Margaret was my dad's sister, estranged from the family after some falling out. I'd never fully understood. She looked older, but sharp, her eyes scanning me with a mix of curiosity and something else empathy. Maybe. Susan, she said, her voice warm but firm. I heard about Mary's estate. We need to talk. The man beside her stepped forward. I'm James Carter, Margaret's attorney. I'm here about a matter connected to the Caldwell Trust. I froze, my mind racing. Another lawyer? Another secret? I led them inside, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes as we re-entered the dining room. Margaret's presence caused a stir. My dad's face went pale, and my mom's lips thinned to a line. Margaret? My dad said, his voice low. What are you doing here? She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. I came to clear up some family history. Isat. It seems tonight's the perfect time for it. Go and. Margaret took a seat, uninvited, and Carter stood beside her, opening his briefcase. I represent Margaret in matters related to the Caldwell-Miller connection, he said, his voice calm but authoritative. There's more to Mary's story than what Mr. Reed has shared, and it involves all of you. My mom scoffed. This is getting ridiculous. What's next? Another fortune? Carter didn't blink. Not exactly, but there's a second trust, established by someone close to Mary, that affects Susan directly. I felt my stomach drop. A second trust? My dad leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Who set it up, and why Susan? Carter glanced at Margaret, who nodded for him to continue. The trust was created by Robert Langley, a man who loved Mary decades ago. Before she married your father, Isats, the name meant nothing to me, but it hit my dad like a punch. Langley? As in Langley Shipping? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Carter nodded. The same. Robert and Mary were engaged in the 1952nd, but her family opposed it. When she chose him over the Caldwell fortune, his family gave him an ultimatum: end the engagement or lose everything. He chose the money, and Mary walked away, heartbroken, but determined to live her own way. Quote, I stared at Margaret, trying to process this. My grandmother had been engaged to someone else, someone from another wealthy family. It was too much to take in. Linda broke the silence, her voice dripping with sarcasm. So Grandma was some tragic romantic figure? And now Susan gets another payout because of it? This is a joke? Margaret turned to her, her gaze sharp. It's no joke. Linda. Robert never forgot Mary. He never married. And when he died, he left a trust worth $25 million for her descendants, specifically for any who reconnected with the Langley family through marriage or significant association. My mom's face twisted with disbelief. And how does Susan qualify for that? Carter pulled out a document, his voice steady. Susan's freelance work included a project for a Langley-owned gallery last year. It was a small contract, but it qualifies as a connection under the trust's terms. I blinked, remembering the Java logo design for a small art gallery in Miami. I'd had no idea it was tied to some old money dynasty. The table erupted in whispers, my cousins exchanging looks, my aunts muttering about fairness. My mom's voice cut through the noise. This is outrageous. Susan does nothing her whole life. And now she's getting millions because of some random job? Linda's been building a real career. Linda nodded, her face red. I've worked for everything I have. Susan's just getting handouts for being a failure. Their words burned, but I was too stunned to respond. Reed stepped in, his voice calm but firm. Mary's trust and Langley's trust were designed to give Susan freedom, not to reward achievement. Mary wanted her to have choices, to live without being judged by people who don't see her worth. Margaret nodded, her eyes on me. Mary knew what it was like to be dismissed. Susan, she faced it from her own family, just like you're facing it now. That's why she made sure you'd have this. Quote. I looked around the table, seeing the mix of envy, disbelief, and resentment in my family's faces. My mom's earlier words calling me worthless hung in the air, now layered with the irony of this massive inheritance. I wanted to say something, to defend myself, but the weight of it all kept me quiet. Margaret leaned toward me, her voice low. There's more to this story. Susan, Mary left you a letter, and I think you need to read it before this goes any further. Reed handed me an envelope. My grandmother's familiar handwriting on the front. I held it, feeling a connection to her, a lifeline in the chaos of this dinner. Whatever was in that letter, I knew it would change how I saw myself, my family, and the future I'd never dared to imagine. Holding my grandmother's letter in my hands, I felt a surge of connection to her, a lifeline pulling me back from the chaos of the dinner table where my mom and Linda had just torn into me, their words still stinging like fresh wounds. Margaret's arrival with her lawyer, James Carter, had already shifted the air, and now their revelation about Robert Langley and a second trust worth $25 million had my family reeling, their faces a mix of shock and calculation. My dad, always the pragmatist, broke the tension first. So, what's this Langley trust got to do with us? Susan's not married to anyone connected to them, he said, his voice gruff, like he was trying to wrestle control of the conversation back. Carter glanced at me, his expression steady. It's not about marriage this time. Isaac, the trust was set up for Mary's descendants, who formed any significant connection to the Langley family. Susan's freelance work for their gallery last year qualifies her. Linda scoffed, tossing her napkin on the table. A logo design, that's what gets her millions? I've been working my tail off for years. And she gets a jackpot for a side gig? Her voice was sharp, but I caught a flicker of unease in her eyes, like she was starting to realize the ground was shifting under her. My mom jumped in, her tone venomous. This is just too convenient. Susan, you've been playing the poor artist card forever, and now you're drowning in money from some secret family history? You expect us to buy that you didn't know? I gripped the envelope tighter, my frustration boiling over. I didn't know. Mom, Grandma never told me any of this. I'm as shocked as you are, I said, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. Margaret leaned forward, her gaze cutting through the room. Maybe you should hear what Mary had to say before you keep accusing her, she said, nodding toward the letter. She knew how this family treated Susan, and she made sure her legacy would give her a way out. Quote, I looked at the envelope, my grandmother's handwriting a familiar anchor in this storm of revelations. I wanted to open it, to hear her voice through her words. But the weight of everyone's eyes, my aunts whispering, my cousins staring, Linda gloring madame hesitate. Margaret sensed it and spoke up, her voice firm but not unkind. Susan, you don't owe them an audience. But if you're ready, that letter might help you understand why this is happening now. I nodded, taking a deep breath, and slid my finger under the flap, breaking the seal. The paper felt heavy, like it carried more than just words. I didn't read it out loud yet. I needed to see it for myself first. The letter was short, written in Mary's neat, slanted script, and as I scanned it, I felt her presence, her strength, guiding me through this moment. She wrote about her life before my grandfather, about Robert Langley, a man she loved deeply until his family forced him to choose between her and his inheritance. She chose love when she met my grandfather later, but Robert chose money, a decision that haunted him. She mentioned the Caldwell Trust, the $65 million she never wanted but left for me to have freedom, and she hinted at Robert's trust, something she'd learned about years after my grandfather's death. A gesture of atonement from a man who never stopped regretting his choice. I looked up, my eyes stinging with unshed tears, and Margaret caught my gaze. There's more to this than money, isn't there? She said softly. I nodded, still processing. Grandma knew I'd need this. Not just the money, but the truth, I said, my voice catching. Carter cleared his throat, addressing the table. The Langley Trust was Robert's way of making amends. He never married, never had children, and when he died, he left instructions for his fortune to go to Mary's descendants if they ever crossed paths with his family again. Susan's work for the gallery triggered it. But it's Mary's legacy that ties it all together. My dad's face was hard to read. A mix of disbelief and something like grudging respect. So, what's the total Susan's getting? 40 from the Caldwell Trust. 25 from this Langley one? He asked. His voice, all business. Carter nodded. $65 million. Combined. After taxes and allocations for Jessica's care, the number hung in the air, impossible to grasp, and I saw Linda's face twist with envy. 65 million for doing nothing? I've built a career, a name, and she gets handed this? She snapped, her voice rising. My mom didn't hold back either. This is an insult to everything Linda's worked for. Susan's never earned anything like this. She's been a burden on this family, always needing help, always falling short. Quote, their words cut deep, but something in me shifted as I held Mary's letter. I thought about all the times I'd tried to prove myself to win their approval, only to be met with judgment. I thought about Mary, who'd walked away from wealth to live a life true to herself, and how she'd seen the same strength in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. I folded the letter carefully and looked at my mom. You've called me worthless my whole life. Mom. You and Linda never stopped reminding me I wasn't enough. But Grandma saw something different, and she made sure I'd have what I needed to stand on my own. Linda rolled her eyes. Oh, please, spare us the sob story. You're just lucky. That's all. Margaret cooed in, her voice sharp. Luck? Mary gave up everything for her values, something you wouldn't understand. Linda. She made sure Susan wouldn't have to beg for your approval. My dad tried to smooth things over, his tone gruff. Let's not get heated. This is a lot to take in. Maybe we should talk this out later. Privately. But Margaret shook her head. No. Isaac. This needs to be out in the open. You've all treated Susan like she doesn't belong, just like the Caldwells treated Mary. History's repeating itself. But this time, Susan's got the power to walk away. Quote, I felt a clarity I hadn't known before, holding Mary's letter like a shield, my family's disdain, their accusations, their belief that I was less than Linda. It all felt smaller in the face of what Mary had given me, not just the money, but the truth about who she was and who I could be. I looked at Margaret, grateful for her unexpected support. Why are you here? Margaret? You've been gone from this family for years? I asked, needing to understand her role in this. She sighed, her eyes softening. I left because I couldn't stand the way this family measures worth by money, status, who's on top. When I heard about Mary's trust, I knew I had to come back. To make sure you weren't alone in this. Mary reached out to me years ago, told me her story, asked me to watch out for you if this day ever came. Carter nodded, pulling another document from his briefcase. Margaret's been tracking the Langley Trust for decades, ensuring it reached you. She's here to honor Mary's wishes, not just the legal ones. My mom's face was pale now, her usual sharpness dulled by the weight of these revelations. Linda, though, wasn't done. This is all a setup. Susan's been playing us, acting like the victim while she's sitting on a fortune, she said, her voice dripping with resentment. I met her Haza, feeling stronger than I ever had. I didn't ask for this, Linda, but I'm done trying to prove myself to you. Grandma gave me more than money, she gave me the freedom to stop caring what you think. The table fell quiet, my words hanging heavy, and I knew the next moment, whatever it was, would define everything that came after. With my grandmother's letter still in my hand, its weight anchoring me against the storm of accusations and envy swirling around the dinner table. I felt a resolve building inside me, stronger than anything I'd ever known. My mom's sharp words, Linda's bitter resentment, and the skeptical glances from my aunts and uncles had stripped away any illusion that I could ever belong here. Margaret's support and the truth about Mary's past had given me a new lens to see myself through, one that didn't depend on my family's approval. I looked down at the letter, Mary's words calling me to something bigger, and I knew it was time to speak. I unfolded the pages and began to read aloud, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. My dearest Susan, the letter began. If you're reading this, Thomas has done his job, and you now know about the Caldwell inheritance. I kept it from you, not out of secrecy, but to let you grow into the woman you are, without the burden of wealth shaping your choices. Long before I met your grandfather, I loved a man named Robert Langley. Our love was real, but his family's demands tore us apart. I chose my heart when I met your grandfather, and I never regretted it. But Robert carried his regret until the end. When you took that gallery job last year, I saw a chance for his atonement to reach you. A way to give you the freedom I fought for. This money isn't the point. It's a tool. Use it to live true to yourself, to walk away from those who can't see your worth, to build a life that reflects your heart. You've always been enough. Susan, exactly as you are. All my love. Grandma Mary. Quote. My voice broke on her name, and I felt tears spill down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from the clarity her words brought me. Mary had known the battles I'd face, not just with money, but with a family that measured worth in all the wrong ways. I looked up, meeting the eyes of everyone at the table. My mom's tight-lipped disapproval, Linda's barely concealed fury, my dad's uneasy calculation. I set the letter down and stood, feeling lighter than I ever had in this house. Thank you, Mom, for making it clear how you've always seen me, I said, my voice carrying a strength I didn't know I had. And thank you, Linda, for reminding me every chance you got that I'd never measure up. But I'm done trying to prove myself to you. Grandma gave me more than money. She gave me the courage to stop begging for your respect. Linda Sikofit, crossing her arms. So you're just going to take the money and run? Typical, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. My mom chimed in, her tone icy. You've always been ungrateful. Susan, we gave you everything. And this is how you repay us? I shook my head. Done with their accusations. I didn't ask for this, but I'm not going to let you twist it into something I should be ashamed of. I've spent years trying to be the daughter you wanted, the sister you could be proud of, but it was never enough. I'm not doing it anymore. My dad tried to step in, his voice gruff. Let's calm down. Susan, we're still a family. We can figure this out. But Margaret? Still seated. Cut him off. Can you? Isaac? You've spent years letting Jessica and Linda tear her down. Mary saw it, and she made sure Susan wouldn't have to stay in a place where she's not valued. Her words hit hard, and I saw my dad flinch, like he was seeing his own role in this for the first time. I turned to Margaret, grateful for her unexpected alliance. Why didn't you tell me any of this sooner? I asked. She smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. Mary asked me to wait until the trusts were revealed. She wanted you to find your own strength first, to face this family on your own terms. I'm just here to make sure her wishes are honored. Quote. I looked at Thomas Reed, who nodded encouragingly, and James Carter, who was packing up his briefcase. His job done. The legal details can be handled later. Reed said, but Mary's letter says it all. She wanted you to have choices. Susan, not obligations. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle in. I turned back to the table, my family's faces a blur of resentment and disbelief. And I knew this was the end of trying to fit into their world. I'm leaving, I said, my voice calm but final. Not just tonight, but for good. I don't need to be here, trying to earn a place where I'm only tolerated. Grandma gave me the freedom to choose, and I choose to walk away. Linda opened her mouth, probably to throw another jab, but Margaret raised a hand. Let her go. Linda, you've done enough. My mom's face was pale, her usual sharpness gone, but she didn't say anything. My dad just looked down, his hands folded tightly together. As I turned to leave, my cousin Emily, who'd been quiet all night, stood and hugged me quickly. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Call me later, okay? I nodded, grateful for her small gesture of support. Margaret followed me to the door, her presence steadying me. You're not alone, Susan, she said softly. Mary's with you, and so am I. Otside. The warm Miami night wrapped around me, the hum of cicadas filling the air. I stood on the driveway, the glow of my parents' house fading behind me, and felt a profound sense of release. The $65 million wasn't the real gift. Mary had given me something far more valuable, the courage to stand up for myself, to walk away from a family that couldn't see me, to build a life that honored her values and mine. I thought about her letter, her life, the choices she made, and I knew I was ready to start over, not as the daughter they wanted, but as the woman I was meant to be. As I drove away, the weight of years of judgment lifted, replaced by a freedom I'd never known, a legacy of love and strength that no amount of money could ever match.